My name is Sydney, and I'm 28 years old. The notification that liquidated my role as the family bank didn't happen during a scream-filled argument. It arrived silently during a high-stakes audit meeting that could define my entire career. It was Tuesday. The air in the conference room was sterile and cold. My phone lit up with my mother's name, Laura, and a single line appeared on the screen. We found a new partner. We don't need your negativity anymore. We're cutting ties. No warning, just that. 5 seconds later, my younger sister Elizabeth reacted to the message with a heart emoji. A heart. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I stared at the message, the taste of my lukewarm water turning metallic in my mouth. I didn't even feel anger, just the kind of numbness that comes when you've watched a building collapse in slow motion and finally see the dust settle. So I excused myself. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I walked to my office, closed the blinds, and locked the door. My hands were steady as I opened my laptop. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't ask why. I logged into the family business accounts, the ones I managed for free, the ones I'd spent weekends fixing while they were out spending. I saw the transactions immediately. Elizabeth's influencer trips to Tulum classified as marketing expenses. My father Brian's lease on a $58,000 luxury SUV charged to the company card. The $3,500 monthly withdrawal labeled operating expenses that went straight into my mother's personal account. They thought they were clever. They thought they had found a new investor, some hard money lender who didn't ask questions, and that meant they didn't need my strict oversight anymore. They thought I was just a buzzkill. They forgot I was a forensic accountant, and they definitely forgot that I was the guarantor on their commercial line of credit. I opened the bank portal for the $250,000 line of credit. The cursor hovered over the management tab. For 3 years, I had been their safety net. I had co-signed because they said it was for the family legacy. I had covered the interest payments when they were short. I had fixed their tax returns when they tried to claim vacations as business trips. I had been the adult in the room while they played house with other people's money. And the second they thought they had a better deal, they discarded me via text message. I clicked freeze account. A confirmation window popped up. Are you sure? I didn't hesitate. I clicked yes. Then I navigated to the guarantor section. Initiate removal of guarantor due to breach of contract. I attached the text message from my mother as evidence of the severance of our business relationship. I hit submit. The screen refreshed. Request pending. Account frozen. It was done. The action was immediate and lethal. I sat back in my chair, the silence of my office pressing against my ears. My phone buzzed again. A notification from the bank. Alert: commercial line of credit ending in 9987 has been suspended. I watched the notification fade from the screen. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. I felt like I had just set down a backpack filled with rocks that I had been carrying since I was 22. I thought of the nights I'd spent going over their ledgers, trying to find ways to make the numbers work, trying to save them from themselves. I thought of the times I'd said no to my fiancé, Jose, about a weekend trip, because I had to pay for an emergency repair on one of their flip houses. I had been their silent investor, their fixer, their insurance policy, and they had treated me like an employee they could fire at will. Well, they were about to find out what happens when the insurance policy gets canceled. I opened my email and drafted a message to the new lender they had mentioned in previous conversations, the shady one with the high interest rates. Subject: notice of guarantor withdrawal. I attached the bank confirmation. I didn't need to say anything else. Professional courtesy. If they were investing based on my credit score, they deserved to know that asset was no longer on the table. I hit send. Then I closed my laptop. The blue glow of the screen vanished, leaving me in the soft afternoon light. My reflection in the window looked different, calmer, sharper. I wasn't the daughter who begged for approval anymore. I was the auditor who had just closed a file on a bad investment. I picked up my phone and blocked their numbers. Mom, Dad, Elizabeth, one by one. I didn't want to hear the panic when the credit cards were declined. I didn't want to hear the screaming when the checks bounced. I wanted silence, and for the first time in my life, I was going to get it. I watched the progress bar on my screen inch forward, processing the removal of my name from $250,000 of debt. It was taking seconds to undo what had taken me 3 years to suffocate under. People always ask why. Why does a smart woman, a forensic accountant who literally hunts down fraud for a living, sign her life away to people who clearly don't respect her? It wasn't because I was weak. It wasn't even because I was afraid. It was because I was a gambler. In my line of work, we study cognitive biases. The most dangerous one is the sunk cost fallacy. It's the voice in your head that says, you can't fold your hand now because you've already put too many chips in the pot. If you walk away, you lose everything you've invested. But if you stay, if you put in just a little more, maybe you can turn it around. Maybe you can hit the jackpot. For me, the jackpot wasn't money. It was the delusion that if I just solved one more crisis, if I just covered one more overdraft, my father would look at me with the same adoration he gave Elizabeth when she simply walked into a room. I remember the day I signed the papers for the commercial line of credit. It was 3 years ago. We were in a small office at the bank branch near their house. My father Brian was wearing his lucky suit, the one he wore when he was pitching a big idea. He had his hand on my shoulder, heavy and warm. He told the loan officer that I was the brains of the operation. He said, "This is Sydney. She's the one who's going to make sure the legacy survives." Legacy. That was the chip they always played. I looked at my mother, Laura. She had tears in her eyes. She squeezed my hand and whispered that I was saving them, that I was the good one, the responsible one. I felt a rush of dopamine that was stronger than any drug. I felt seen. So I signed. I put my credit score, my savings, and my future on the line for a flip house business that had never turned a profit. I thought I was buying equity in this family. I thought I was investing in a future where I had a seat at the table. But that's the thing about the sunk cost fallacy. The house always wins. Over the next 3 years, I kept throwing good money after bad. When they missed a payment, I covered it, because if the loan defaulted, my initial investment of trust would be worthless. When they needed a new car to keep up appearances for clients, I signed the lease because I needed them to succeed, so my sacrifice would mean something. I spent my weekends reconciling their messy receipts while Elizabeth spent hers in Cabo. I canceled vacations with Jose to pay for emergency roof repairs on houses they hadn't bothered to inspect properly. I was chasing my losses, convinced that the next check would be the one that fixed everything. I was an addict, and their approval was the needle. But looking at the frozen screen now, the clarity was blinding. It wasn't a partnership, it was a Ponzi scheme. They were paying me meaningless dividends of affection, using the capital of my own self-esteem. There was never going to be a return on investment. There was never going to be a moment where they handed me a check and said, "Thank you, you can rest now." They were going to bleed me dry until I was bankrupt, and then they were going to discard me, just like they did this morning. The text message wasn't a sudden break. It was a margin call. They found a new lender, a new source of liquidity, so my capital was no longer required. They thought they were firing me. They didn't realize I was the one closing the ledger. I rubbed my eyes, expecting to feel grief. I waited for the crushing sadness of losing my parents, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of an auditor finding the missing variable that balances the equation. I wasn't losing a family, I was writing off a bad debt. I was cutting my losses before I lost myself completely. The computer pinged, the request was processed, the commercial line was locked down, no more withdrawals, no more transfers, the casino was closed. I reached for my phone not to call them, but to call Jose. I needed a lawyer, and for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't going to lie to him about how bad the numbers really were. It took exactly 48 hours for the silence to break. The timeline was almost mathematically predictable. Banks usually take 24 hours to process a guarantor removal and another 24 to notify the primary account holders. So when my phone lit up on Thursday afternoon with a blocked number, I knew exactly what was happening. The storm had made landfall. I was in my office, the glass walls insulating me from the hum of the firm. I watched the phone vibrate on my desk. It stopped, then started again immediately. Then the office line rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then my email notification chimed. Subject urgent. Please call. Sender Laura via a new Gmail address. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. I could imagine the contents perfectly. The confusion first, then the panic, then the rage. It's a biological response. In nature, when a parasite realizes its host is dying or detaching, it doesn't quietly accept its fate. It releases toxins. It induces a cytokine storm. It tries to make the host so sick that the body stops fighting the infection just to survive the symptoms. My family was the parasite and their rage was the toxin. My assistant Sarah knocked on the door. She looked uneasy. "Sydney, there's a woman on line 2 who says she's your mother. She sounds hysterical. She says it's a medical emergency." I felt a flicker of the old reflex, the adrenaline spike, the urge to fix it. But I tamped it down. It's not a medical emergency, Sarah. It's a financial one. Tell her I'm in a deposition and cannot be disturbed. Sarah nodded and left. I turned back to my screen, but my focus was gone. I opened a new browser window and searched for Elizabeth's social media. It was a morbid curiosity, like checking the weather radar for a hurricane you know is coming. And there it was. A video posted 20 minutes ago. Elizabeth was in her car, the lighting perfect tears, strategically glistening on her lashes, without ruining her mascara. The caption read, "When toxic family members try to ruin your success because they're jealous of your light." She was vague booking, crafting a narrative where she was the victim of my cruelty. "I just don't understand how someone can be so hateful," she whispered to the camera. "We were finally getting somewhere, finally building something, and she just pulled the rug out. Because she can't stand to see us happy." The comments were already filling up with sympathy. "Stay strong, Queen. Jealousy is a disease. Cut them off, babe." I scrolled, feeling a cold detachment. They were rewriting history in real time. They weren't panicking because they missed me. They were panicking because the credit card was declined at the gas station. They were panicking because the new investor, the one they discarded me for, had likely run a credit check and seen the massive red flag of a frozen line of credit. Then came the voicemails. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, but the transcripts appeared in my inbox. My father, Brian. His voice wasn't sad. It was venomous. "You think you're smart, Sydney. You think this is funny. You just cost us the deal. The funding fell through because the bank froze the assets. You are going to fix this. You are going to call them right now and tell them it was a mistake. Or so help me God, I will sue you for breach of fiduciary duty." Fiduciary duty. I almost laughed. He was using words he'd heard on TV. He didn't understand that a guarantor has no fiduciary duty to the borrower. The borrower has a duty to the guarantor not to default. He was threatening me with legal action for refusing to let him rob me. I watched the notifications roll in. It was an extinction burst, the final desperate explosion of energy before a behavior dies. They were throwing everything at the wall: guilt, shame, threats, public humiliation. They were trying to trigger the old Sydney, the one who was terrified of disapproval, but that Sydney was gone. She had been audited and found redundant. I called Jose. "They're escalating," I said when he picked up. I expected that his voice was calm, an anchor in the chaos. "Do you want me to send a cease and desist?" "Not yet," I said. "Let them burn themselves out. But I need you to come to the office. I'm reviewing the old ledgers, the ones from before the digital transition. I found something." "What did you find?" "I found a transfer," I said, looking at the PDF on my screen. "A recurring transfer to an LLC called Blue Heron Holdings. It started 6 months after I signed the loans." "Jose, I don't think they're just bad with money. I think they're hiding it." "I'm on my way." I hung up and looked out the window at the city skyline. The panic on my phone screen felt distant now, like a siren wailing blocks away. They were screaming because the money tap had turned off. But they didn't realize that was the least of their problems. I was about to turn on the lights, and parasites hate the light. Jose arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't bring takeout or wine. He brought his laptop and a banker's box of legal pads. That's why I love him. He knows that for me, peace of mind doesn't come from comfort food. It comes from documentation. He sat up across from me at the conference table. "Okay," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's look at the liability. If they sue for breach of fiduciary duty, it's nonsense, but we need to make sure your withdrawal was airtight. Show me the books." We spent the next hour in what I call the quiet zone. It's that hyper-focused state where the world falls away and only the data remains. I projected the ledgers onto the smartboard. We traced the cash flow of the family business for the last fiscal year. It was a mess of mismanagement, overpriced contractors, late fees, interest penalties. But then we got to the Blue Heron transfers. There I said, pointing to a line item from 8 months ago. "Transfer to external vendor Blue Heron Holdings. $9,000. Labeled as consulting fees." Jose frowned. "Who are they? I've never seen a vendor contract for them." "Neither have I." "And look," I scrolled down. "It happens again. Every month, varying amounts. 6,000, 12,000. Always labeled vaguely. Site management, design retainer, consulting." I opened the state's Secretary of State business search. It's public record, a tool I use every day to catch people trying to hide assets in divorce cases. I typed in Blue Heron Holdings LLC. The search wheel spun for an agonizing second before the results popped up. I felt the blood drain from my face. Registered Agent Laura, my mother. Principal address, a P.O. box in a town 3 hours away. But that wasn't the smoking gun. I dug deeper, pulling the articles of organization. The LLC was structured as a pass-through entity for a trust, the Elizabeth Future Trust. I sat back the air, leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. Jose stared at the screen, his lawyer brain clicking pieces together faster than I could say them out loud. They weren't just spending the money, Sydney, he said, his voice low and dangerous. They were laundering it. It was the missing variable. The math finally made sense. They had borrowed $250,000 against my credit. They claimed the business was failing, that they were broke, that they needed me to cover the interest payments because market conditions were tough. But the market wasn't tough. They were siphoning the loan principal, my liability, into a protected asset for my sister. They were planning to default, I realized, the words tasting like ash. They were going to max out the credit line, transfer the cash to this shell company, and then file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy on the main business. Leaving you holding the bag for the debt, Jose finished, while they walked away with a 6-figure nest egg for Elizabeth. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't just a toxic family being bad with money. It was premeditated, structured fraud. They had looked me in the eye, begged me to co-sign to save the family legacy, all while digging a trap they intended to push me into. They valued Elizabeth's future comfort more than my financial survival. I was the sacrifice they were willing to make to ensure their golden child never had to work. The last microscopic thread of guilt, I had been holding on to the idea that maybe they were just desperate, sad old people, snapped. It didn't just break, it disintegrated. This is criminal, Jose said. This is fraudulent conveyance. If a bankruptcy trustee saw this, they'd go to prison. I know, I said. My voice was steady, colder than it had ever been. And they're about to find out that the only thing worse than a forensic accountant for a daughter is a forensic accountant they tried to frame. I printed the documents. The articles of organization, the transfer logs, the bank statements. I compiled them into a new file. I wasn't going to wait for them to sue me. I wasn't going to wait for them to apologize. What do you want to do? Jose asked. I looked at the stack of paper. I want to invite them to a meeting. You think they'll come? Oh, they'll come, I said, because I'm going to tell them I'm ready to negotiate the release of the funds. They'll think they won. They'll think I cracked. I picked up my phone and unblocked my father's number. I typed a single text. Come to my office tomorrow at 10 in the morning. We need to settle this. He replied in 30 seconds. Glad you finally came to your senses. I stared at his words. He had no idea. He thought he was coming to a surrender. He didn't know he was walking into a foreclosure. They arrived at 9:58 in the morning. Punctuality is easy when you think you're coming to collect a check. I watched them from the mezzanine. My father Brian was wearing his closer suit again, the navy one with the gold cufflinks. My mother Laura had worn a pastel cardigan, playing the role of the concerned, soft-hearted matriarch. Elizabeth was trailing behind them, scrolling on her phone, looking bored, as if salvaging the family fortune was just an errand, interfering with her brunch plans. They walked into the lobby with a swagger I hadn't seen in years. They thought I had cracked. They thought the silence of the last 48 hours was me crumbling under the pressure of their disapproval. They didn't know it was just the quiet before the verdict. I met them at the reception desk. I didn't smile. I didn't offer coffee. Sydney, my mother said. Reaching out for a hug, I deftly sidestepped. Her eyes scanned the lobby, performing for an audience of receptionists and security guards. We were so worried. You've been acting so erratic. Conference room B, I said. My voice was flat. Follow me. I led them past the open-plan desks, past the curious glances of junior auditors. I opened the heavy glass door to the boardroom. Jose was already there, standing at the head of the table, a stack of files in front of him. My father stopped. Who is this? We don't need lawyers, Sydney. This is a family meeting. This is a settlement meeting, I corrected. And Jose isn't just my fiancé. He's my counsel. Sit down. Saturday, the dynamic shifted instantly. The boardroom is my arena, not theirs. The air conditioning hummed. I plugged my laptop into the HDMI cable. The projector whirred to life, casting a harsh white light on the screen behind me. I assume you're here to unfreeze the credit line, I said, standing while they Saturday. We're here to accept your apology, my father said, leaning back, trying to reclaim the space. And to fix the mess you made with the lender. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was to explain your tantrum? I didn't answer. I clicked a key. The screen changed. Blue Heron Holdings, LLC. Registered Agent Laura. Beneficiary Elizabeth Future Trust. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Elizabeth looked up from her phone, her eyes widening. My mother went pale. My father's jaw worked, but no sound came out. "We know," I said. "We know about the transfers. We know about the shell company. We know you were siphoning the loan principal to hide assets before filing for bankruptcy." That's tax planning," my father stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You don't understand high-level finance, Sydney. We were protecting the estate." "You were committing fraudulent conveyance," Jose said. His voice was calm, professional, lethal. "You were moving assets out of a dying business to defraud creditors. Specifically to defraud Sydney, who you left on the hook for the debt." "How dare you?" My mother stood up, her voice trembling with that weaponized fragility she used so well. "We did this for the family, to ensure Elizabeth had a safety net. You have a career, Sydney. You can handle the debt. Your sister needs support." They started shouting then, all of them. My father yelling about ungrateful daughters. My mother crying about how I was twisting their love. Elizabeth screeching that I was jealous of her trust fund. It was a wall of noise, a cacophony of entitlement and fear. And that's when I learned the most important lesson of my life. I call it the sound of a closing door. For years, I thought power was about having the best argument. I thought if I could just explain myself clearly enough, if I could just scream my pain loud enough, they would finally hear me. I thought communication was the key. But I was wrong. True power isn't in the noise, it's in the silence. Explaining is a form of begging. It's an attempt to get someone to validate your reality. When you stop explaining, when you stop arguing, you stop handing them your power. I didn't shout back. I didn't try to justify why it was wrong to steal from me. I just watched them. I let their words hit the silence and fall flat. I looked at them not as giants, but as small, desperate people who had just realized the locks had been changed. When they finally ran out of breath, realizing I wasn't engaging the room, fell quiet again. "Are you done?" I asked. My father glared. "You can't prove any of this." "I don't have to prove it to you," I said. I signaled Jose. He slid 3 thick envelopes across the polished mahogany table. "This is a formal notice of a fraud investigation initiated by the bank," I said. "I submitted the evidence this morning. They are very interested in Blue Heron Holdings." My father picked up the envelope, his hands shaking violently. "And this," I continued, "is my formal revocation of the guarantee. The bank accepted it based on the evidence of bad faith dealing. The credit line is closed, permanently. The debt is now entirely yours." "You're sending us to jail," Elizabeth whispered the reality, finally piercing her bubble. "I'm not sending you anywhere," I said. "I'm just turning on the lights." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. The keys to the project house, the McMansion they were living in, the one bought with the money I secured, the one they were letting rot while they funneled cash to Elizabeth. I slid the keys across the table. They clattered loudly, the metal sound echoing like a gunshot. "I'm divesting," I said. "The house, the business, the family, I'm out." "Sydney, wait." My mother lunged for my hand, the tears real, now born of terror. "We can fix this. We can put the money back. Please don't leave us like this." I pulled my hand back. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I felt nothing. No hate, no love, just the cool detachment of an auditor closing a file. "The meeting is over," I said. Jose and I walked out. We didn't look back. Behind us, the shouting started again, but it sounded muffled, distant, like a radio playing in another room. I walked through the lobby, past the security guard, and out into the street. The sun was shining. The air smelled like exhaust and coffee and freedom. The door had closed, and I loved the sound it made. 6 months is a lifetime in the financial world. Markets crash, assets liquidate, and new entities rise from the ashes of failed ventures. It's been exactly 180 days since I walked out of that conference room, and the landscape of my life has been completely restructured. The fallout for my family was exactly what the data predicted. Without the credit line, the flip house, the one they were living in while pretending to renovate, stalled. They couldn't pay the contractors. They couldn't pay the mortgage. The bank moved fast. The foreclosure auction happened 3 weeks ago. I didn't go. I didn't even look up the listing online. I just saw the notification from the county clerk's office, filed it under resolved, and moved on. The fraud investigation is slower, but it's moving. The district attorney is very interested in the tax implications of Blue Heron Holdings. My father tried to reach out through a third-party lawyer. offering a settlement if I would retract my statement to the bank. I didn't respond. I let Jose handle it. His response was a single sentence: "My client has no interest in negotiating with the defendants." As for me, I got promoted. I'm a senior partner now. The firm recognized that someone who can spot a shell company hidden inside a family trust is exactly the kind of shark they want leading the audit division. I'm sitting on my balcony now. It's Friday evening. The city lights are blinking on a grid of gold against the twilight. Jose is inside pouring 2 glasses of a vintage red wine. I bought it. I paid for the apartment, I paid for the furniture. Every single thing in my line of sight belongs to me free and clear. There are no liens on my peace of mind. I pick up my phone one last time. I navigate to the blocked messages folder. It's a habit I'm trying to break, like checking a lock you know is secured. There are dozens of them. Desperate texts from my mother about family loyalty. Angry rants from my father about ungrateful children. Vague, passive-aggressive quotes from Elizabeth about karma. They are still trying to transact in a currency I no longer accept. They want my guilt. They want my anger. They want my engagement. But I'm not buying. Jose steps out onto the balcony and hands me a glass. He sits beside me, comfortable in the silence. He doesn't ask if I'm okay. He knows I am. "You checking the market?" he asks, nodding at my phone. "Just clearing the cache," I say. I press select all. Then I press delete. The messages vanish. The history is gone. The server is wiped clean. I look out at the city. For years I thought solvency was just a math problem. I thought it was about assets exceeding liabilities. I thought if I just poured enough money into the black hole of my family's expectations, eventually I would be in the black. Eventually I would be worthy. But I realized tonight that solvency isn't about money. It's about emotional liquidity. It's the ability to walk away from a bad investment without looking back. It's the freedom to wake up in the morning and not owe anyone a piece of your soul just to keep the peace. It's knowing that your value isn't determined by how much you can be used. My family is bankrupt. Not just financially, but morally. They spent everything they had, my trust, my love, my loyalty, and they have nothing left to show for it. But me, I'm profitable. I have my integrity. I have my peace. And I have the sound of a closing door that stays closed.